our grandparents had to endure what they had to endure. That was very heavy. That was a struggle. And I want to take their perseverance and like their new approach to life and fullness. And I want to live in that space because I think that that's doing them the respect and justice for what they went through and the lives that they built out of it.
If you heard what I heard, this podcast shares the powerful stories of Holocaust survivors told by their grandchildren, the last generation to ever hear Holocaust survivor stories firsthand. So join me as we listen, learn, and remember. Together, we can make sure the world will never forget so that it never happens again. We're here today with Shawna Wexler, If You Heard What I Heard interviewee and advisor. Shauna is a talent manager at Sugar 23, mom of 2, granddaughter of 4 Holocaust survivors, proud Jewish woman, and someone I know to have the biggest heart. Welcome, Shauna.
Hi.
Hi, how's it going?
Good morning.
Yay, good
How are
morning.
you?
I'm good. I'm so happy to have you here today.
I'm happy to be here.
So I was thinking today actually about our epic Havdalah dinner that we did back in September that you put together for us. And still one of the most amazing nights of Jewish joy ever. And I know it was such a good follow-up to our Matisyahu concert last May. You know, like when you came to me, you were like, we need to continue the momentum of the Matisyahu concert because it was so powerful. I'm still like getting feedback about the Havdalah dinner, how great it was and how awesome it was. And I don't know. What'd you think?
So Matisyahu was an amazing experience. All of us were very broken, but it was a reminder of our resilience and also a reminder of the fact that both of those things can coexist at one time. And I live really close to the theater, and Micah and I were walking home from that night, and I just could not stop thinking about how we needed to start to live in that joy and that resilience a little bit more. And that was the impetus to why I called you to recreate that emotion at that dinner.
Yeah, people are still talking about that Havdalah dinner and like the chefs that came together for that. I mean, it was incredible. We had Chef Micah, who is Shauna's husband and someone I grew up with, a good friend of mine. And we had Chef Lior from Liora Cafe, and we had Chef Orr from Lodge Bread. And it was just like such a powerful night.
It was a powerful night. It was a beautiful night. You know, the key to your heart is through your stomach in my life.
Yeah.
And so I really felt like we could provide that to all of our friends and family in a beautiful way and with zero pressure, just a night to have fun.
You know, I kept thinking like our Holocaust survivor grandparents just would have loved that night, like on
my
so
gosh.
many levels, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it also was like it felt like all of us were family, even though some of us were strangers to each other, and we could all come together under one roof and enjoy each other's company and all have a base level of understanding of why we were all there.
Yeah. It's such a core of who we are as an organization too, is to build this community and celebrate our resilience. Yeah, I had someone say to me recently, we were watching, I had a meeting and I was like showing someone some of the reels. Like they didn't know that much about our organization. And I just started showing them like some of the reels from our events. And I showed them like the New York event that we did last year, and it was like happy and light. Like all
Yeah.
of our events are like happy and light
Yeah.
and like joyful. And she was like, "Whoa, I wasn't expecting that." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She was like, "The Holocaust nonprofit." And I'm like,
Right.
"Yeah, even more reason for us to be joyful."
Yeah, I also kind of like live in that space. I even said that to you the night we got together last week and did a panel. When they hear that we're the 3 Gs, I think there is this immediate association with struggle and like levity and heaviness. And I really think that for us 3 Gs, and I don't want to speak on behalf of all this, but in my mind, our grandparents had to endure what they had to endure. That was very heavy. That was a struggle. And I want to take what their perseverance and like their new approach to life and fullness. And I want to live in that space because I think that that's doing them the respect and justice for what they went through and the lives that they built out of it.
1000%. Like, I couldn't agree more, and I think a lot of us feel that way, like, I certainly feel that way too, if just, like, they went through the hardest time for us to be able to celebrate and be joyful and, like
That's how I feel,
yeah,
like a lot of when we meet other 3Gs, I love how you always ask in your interviews, what happened after the war? Where did their lives turn out after? And it's a beautiful way to end it because it segues into the framework and the groundwork that was laid for all of us. And there's always going to be hate and there's always going to be struggle. And it's not just in our community, it's in the world. But us shining light and being the light is the best way to combat all of that, in my opinion. We're resilient people. My grandpa said, remember I said this in my interview, human beings were not made to give up. And every day I think like that. And how can we apply that in our day-to-day lives? And the celebration to me is the biggest F you, quite frankly.
it really is. It
Yeah.
really is. Yeah, and also, like, having kids, like, you have 2 unbelievable, so, like, proud Jewish kids,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
and I think that's, like, also the biggest F you. It's like, we're not going anywhere.
We're not going anywhere. And, raising Jewish kids is another big part of it. Is like, I have made it my mission to embrace my religion more so than ever. And I think having a husband who is more religious than I am opened the door for me to tap into that. And also finding this organization and really finding my purpose and using that connection and that circle of people has been really beautiful for me. And my kids are benefiting from it in spades.
I love that. You're such a big part of our organization, you and Micah both, and so grateful for everything you do for us on every level.
It's such an honor, and Micah is also very involved in the organization. He is not a 3G, and so I think it's important also to note that you don't have to have grandparents that survived the Holocaust in order to be close and associated with this organization. I think the messaging of it at the core is how do we come together, this generation in general, how does this generation come together and make sure that the world never forgets? It's a unanimous messaging that way. It's just the 3Gs are the focal point
Yeah.
of how to deliver it.
Yeah, it's such a good point, and I look at Micah and I look at our other mutual friend, David Palitz, who is also incredibly close to our organization, who is not a 3G, and Micah and David both just feel so passionately, they get it, they understand the importance of never forget, but I think there is somebody said something to me recently about how the benefit or one of the benefits or things that we're doing differently with If You Heard What I Heard is just the strong sense of community, but I think that's really credit to us as 3Gs, and honestly, Shauna, a lot of it to you, like, you've helped build our community, so
I think I want to pay it forward. So the way that I heard about the organization was on social media through a friend. And the stars aligned. I'm not on social media as much as some people, and I saw it come up and I was completely curious and I emailed you directly.
yeah.
And I remember I got home and I said to my husband, "Hey, I saw this thing on Jenna's post and I really want to go and I would love for you to go with me." And he told me that you guys went to high school together, and it was honestly kismet, right?
Yeah.
But what it showed me is that all you have to do is express things that you're passionate about, and other people in your orbit can learn about it if you're curious. And all that Jewish geography, I think, pays off in this city.
Oh, it really does. I think, like, across the world, I've
Yeah.
connected with so many 3Gs just across the world that
Yeah.
are incredible, and we all have this, like, connection of our grandparents went through something horrible, so we're gonna live life to the fullest and embrace that resilience.
I also am so curious because there's probably so many people that that I don't, or maybe I do, that have overlaps with my grandparents' stories. And I just want there to be a way eventually in time to uncover those connections because that would be wildly powerful. I just saw a video on social media of these two older men. Did you see this? This is
Yeah.
going viral right now. Who knew each other during the war. They thought that they both had been killed and they were not. They were both alive and they reunited when they were in their 90s. And I just think about that so much. Like at one of your events, I could be standing in a room with somebody who had grandparents or great grandparents that knew or had a connection to mine. And that is mind blowing to me. It's pretty remarkable.
Wait, I don't know if you listened to this week or our recent podcast episode with Ira. I actually talked about that. It's like the only time that I've been able to pinpoint a direct connection. It's crazy. So I filmed Ira's interview in August 2022
Uh huh.
or 2021. I can't remember. It was like a while ago. And he said, my grandfather was at Mauthausen concentration camp and he heard the like planes coming and there were like Allied planes coming in and there were like pamphlets that were being dropped and they heard a German voice over the loudspeaker, but it was an American plane saying like, Nazis, it's time to surrender. Well, a few months later in October of that year, I was filming Kate for her If You Heard What I Heard interview. And her grandfather was from Vienna and ultimately came to the US and joined the US Army as part of a group called the Ritchie Boys that were European immigrants, mostly Jewish, that were sent back to Europe to like infiltrate enemy lines. Kate's grandfather's voice was the voice that Ira's uncle heard over the loudspeaker. Like when Kate said that, I was like, no, you don't understand. I just filmed this story like 2 months ago
I feel like I remember you telling me this.
yeah, because it's crazy. It was like the only time I've had something that I can directly pinpoint. Like I've had a ton of other situations where like Dana, describes the death march that her grandfather was on from Auschwitz. And it was December and it was cold and just the conditions. And then Label was describing like the same exact conditions that his grandfather were on in the death march. So I can pinpoint and say like, for sure they were on the same death march
You
because,
did that with me, actually, I think with David Palitz.
because his grandfather liberated the camps. But his grandfather liberated Dachau.
Weirdly, I think that it was Dachau because you
Really?
said in our interview, David Palitz's grandfather. And for anyone who's watching this, David Palitz is my husband's best friend from high school. Like that, I mean, it gives me chills on my whole body because that's another example of just how wild this connection is and how powerful it is. And with everything that we're going through right now, it just shows me that we're here for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And community is important. Like us having our strong community. I'm like so inspired by everyone who's a part of our community.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And
Of
that,
course.
like, to your point, whether you have Holocaust survivors in your family or not, like,
It doesn't matter.
no, it just come together and be proud to be Jewish.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. It's a beautiful message, and I feel like now more than ever, we just need to lean on that.
I feel like, okay, so I didn't know Grandpa Mo, whose story you shared for If You Heard What I Heard, but I feel like he would, like every event that we do, I feel like he would be living it up.
It's interesting. Yes, and I don't know because here's the thing. He never spoke about any of this. He was extremely broken forever after. He was a tough dad. My dad always tells me he was really tough. He wasn't emotional. He wasn't loving per se to the kids. He was obsessed with my grandmother. He was like out of the French movies, like such a Casanova, but he was like emotionally not as available to his kids. But for his grandkids, he was very emotionally available and loving and nurturing. So I think if he were alive, it would have been kind of an interesting experiment to see if I could have been the person that brought him back to a very hard place and time in his life and could have pulled or broken down, I guess, more than anything, that emotional wall for him to see the joy out of all of the sadness that he went through and created ultimately at the end of his life.
It's so interesting because I feel like as 3Gs, just the time and distance and space between our grandparents' experience with the Holocaust and by the time we heard the stories and knew them in our lives, like, I don't know. I've heard this from a lot of our interviewees that Like there's a desire to just, when you see the pain that our grandparents went through, when they talk about it, or when you notice certain things about them, like you just want to make it better. You want to take the pain away.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah.
With something this big and heavy, there's no way. There's just no way to do that. And I think we know that. However, yeah, I mean, my grandmother, who died last year, knew about this organization, and she hid, so she was never in the camps. Her and her mother hid because she had blonde hair and blue eyes. This is Grandpa Mo's wife. And she knew about the organization, and she was very proud that I was involved, and very moved and very supportive and very touched, as were my aunt and uncle and my father. And she would have definitely been at all of these events, that's for sure. But they had such different experiences, I think, that it was very my grandmother always used to say that my grandpa was a really broken man when they met. But there was something about her that like put a sparkle in his eye. So she really was that person to resuscitate him, quite frankly, and bring life back to him. And yeah, I think everybody's experiences are so different. I mean, a lot of them are the same, as we know through the stories that you have on the platform. A lot of them are the same, but a lot of the stories that people talk about on the platform, or a majority of them, I shouldn't say all of them, are like about the treacherous experiences that people have had. And not always, but I do think that those people come out of the Holocaust and have come out of the Holocaust more broken, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. But I think that it's interesting. I get asked a lot, like, why don't you film the stories of the children of Holocaust survivors? And those stories are important too.
Mhm.
And I think there is work and there are organizations that focus on 2Gs.
Yeah.
But like for us, for 3Gs, like you even said it, Shauna, like he used to call you sweetness. Like there was just, I think there's like a different light that they had towards all of us.
Well, you have to think about it. For anyone that goes through any version of trauma, okay, like it takes a long time to grieve what you've lost. And my grandparents started having a family pretty quickly after the war and right away after they got married. So I feel like that generation experienced a lot of the trauma just by association and osmosis, where over a couple decades later, we got to experience a different version of all of that, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I do think probably the generation above us, the children, the second generation of survivors, their stories would be a lot less focused on the joy as much as the 3Gs are, is what my gut would say.
Yeah, I think like I look at my own mom and there's a lot of trauma and like she would tell you
Yeah.
that like she'd be sitting at my grandparents would have friends over or whatever and they'd be sitting at the table like having dinner and then the phone would ring and there would be crying because either somebody was found to be alive or somebody was found to be dead. And like that was her childhood, you know.
It's extraordinary what the pain is like and how vividly they can remember that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
It's
it's crazy.
crazy. Yeah. And with that, your grandmother, you out of 4 Holocaust survivor grandparents, you have one that thank God is still with us. And
Yes.
she sent the most beautiful note recently. I called you in tears when I got it because it was so special. Like that's the thing. I mean, in her note, she said, I'm so proud of my granddaughter, Shauna, for keeping these stories alive. And like what there's no greater validation I could ask for.
My parents are so proud that I have leaned into this at this stage in my life where I have perspective. I have kids of my own. I've grown up with the stories and I am mature enough to like inhale their stories in a way that my life experiences can resonate with in terms of like stages of life and meeting your husband. Like when I went through and watched all of their tapes, this was all part of it, their childhood, their happy childhoods that they had before this. And my parents just really feel like if I didn't do this, no one probably would. And it's just even more credit to why it is so important what you are doing and the platform that you are building for all of us and for all of our kids and all of our grandkids. And I feel like These stories are important to like, I met someone actually at the last event that we did, and she came and introduced herself. I don't know if you got her contact information, but she goes around to schools with a Holocaust survivor, and she tells them she teaches them, I think this is how she said the format goes. She teaches them about a story, and then she entered and the survivor is with her, and then she introduces the woman as the person from the story that she's telling. And I was so blown away by this woman. And I feel like having a younger generation telling these stories to young kids makes it feel a little bit more tangible, a little bit more tolerable, a little bit more realistic, a little less out of touch. And we should be going to these communities that are not being taught about the Holocaust and say that we are living proof miracles for why we're here. Any impact is an impact.
Yeah.
And it's so important. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with that, like with you raising your kids today, like we talked about this a little bit in your interview, but since you shared your interview, has anything changed for you in how you're raising your kids or infusing that? I mean, you were already raising proud Jews, but did anything shift for you in your relationship with your kids or the importance of sharing the stories with them?
They're so little that it more than anything for me, it was really hard to re-listen to all of my grandparents' stories. One day I will share them with my kids. And because they go to Jewish school, I bet you sooner than anticipated or sooner than I probably would have expected. Years like before kids, I probably would have thought, okay, when they're 15 or 16, we'll share these stories in the way that they were shared with me, because it was so traumatic for my grandparents. But for me, with my kids, they're learning about the history of Jews. So when it becomes time for them, I would like to go into their classrooms and show videos and snippets of their great grandparents' stories. They knew my grandmother for a couple years of their life and have fond memories of her. But I do think it has become ever so clear to me how it is necessary for my children to have a Jewish upbringing, to be surrounded by Jewish friends and family as their community, and to find strength in that. Someone once told me when I was trying to figure out what school I was going to send my kids to, she goes, my parents decided to send me to Jewish school because they wanted my closest friends to be Jewish. Not to say that I don't want my kids to be in a diverse environment, and that's why they have a lot of different circles and they're involved in sports and extracurriculars, but that really stuck with me because all of my best friends growing up were Jewish. I did not go to a Jewish school, but I went to Jewish camp and I always found like identity and purpose in that. And now that I have the ability to make that decision, and having to go through the process of these interviews was so validating to me as to why I made the decision to put them in Jewish school and raise them to have Shabbat every Friday. And I'm excited to send them to Jewish camp and all of those things. I think it's a beautiful thing,
I do too.
and they love it
Yeah, they really do love
without all
it.
the bells and whistles. They don't know anything different, but they've leaned into it so much. And that it brings so much joy to my heart. My grandparents would be really, really proud.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
so too, and it's really cool actually, sometimes you post, videos or we'll share photos of, like, Max holding the Kiddush cup with his little kippah and, like, Noe, like, saying the blessing over the challah, and it's just so sweet. It's, like, the best celebration of Jewish life.
I think Max was saying the prayers for Shabbat, like, fully by the time he was 1.5. I'm not even kidding. I found a video the other day of him singing Hamotzi, and I think he was 1.5. The words were jumbled, the melody was perfect. He had his kippah on that covered his whole head. It was so big for him. Like, it is the cutest thing in the entire world, and they are growing up with it as being a core part of their identity without all of the commotion around what it means or why or it just this is who they are,
Yeah.
and this is how they identify, and it is beautiful and adorable.
Yeah, 100%, and I'm sure it's even tenfold now after October 7th.
After October 7th, that was really hard. There were members of our community at school who lost relatives at the Nova Festival, and it was very difficult to watch them in pain, and it was also very apparent how quickly our community at school came together to support everyone. Because no, even though this one family I remember was speaking about their 2 nieces who were missing at the time, they also had space to grieve along with the rest of us who were grieving for our people. And that just was so pivotal for me and important for me to see. But also at the same time, a lot of people that I know at the school were not sure if they wanted to stay there. There was this moment where people were so scared. They were like, "Okay, we're a target, and what are we doing? What's the plan here? What's the security obviously became even more of a focus, but there were people that were also scared. And I think what's so interesting, out of those couple people that were like, "Maybe we should think about another option," and now that the world is turning this way and honestly turning their backs on Jews, we're scared for our kids' safety. Every single one of those families is still at the school.
Wow.
And every single one of those families decided that the community that they have around them was far more important and outweighed the fear of a potential anything. And I think that that speaks to just the mindset of who we are as a people.
Did any of like the fact that you're a 3G and the granddaughter of 4 Holocaust survivors kick in for you in that moment after October 7th as far as, you know, fear, resilience, any of it?
I think I was so I'm still so broken over the fact that the world is standing by while this is happening. That has been a constant. The stories are really similar, and that's what's very bone chilling to me. I think that I fear that what my grandparents went through, I know that it was not in vain, but if they knew where the world stood right now, I mean, they would roll over in their graves because even they felt pretty certain that this could not happen again. Living in the States, at least, we would be protected to some degree. Of course, the Holocaust the survivor mentality. My grandpa had cash hidden in his closet. They were always ready for an emergency, of course. But I think for me, I just don't understand how my blood, my grandparents, who I loved and adored, and I know the pain that they went through. There are people going through that pain in our world right now, and nobody is listening, and nobody is helping, and nobody is standing up except for us. And I get tormented by that emotion a lot.
Yeah, 100%. That's like the hardest thing. And I hear that a lot from our community from 3Gs. In fact, like right when October 7th happened, because it obviously happened in Israel before we knew about it here. Like
Yeah,
there
yeah.
was like a time lag because, well, it happened over Shabbat. And by the time everyone turned on their phones and whatever, and we heard about it, like I would say that morning on October 8th, or maybe it was October 7th our time, whatever that morning was, I woke up to maybe 5 or 6 text messages from our interviewees saying, like, "We have to do something. What are we doing?" And
Wow.
yeah, and we mobilized very quickly, and a week later, we were holding a panel discussion at NUA to talk about,
I remember that.
like, what was going on. But it was like an immediate knee-jerk reaction for our community, I think because of the historical trauma, the inherited trauma. To hear that this could happen again to our people, just it's like another level.
It's so crazy because it almost feels dreamlike for me remembering that day.
Yeah.
It just it was so I could not believe what I was seeing,
No, it was
and
shocking.
it was shocking.
Yeah.
It was shocking.
Yeah.
But it has mobilized us and all of our purposes so much. Like, that is I always try to see, like, the good in the evil, and the good of that is the Jewish people are coming together and speaking up and speaking out and finding ways to persevere against all odds.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And with that, even like recently with the trauma we've experienced in our own city in Los Angeles with the wildfires, like I don't think any of us here doesn't know one person that's been impacted by that. Like every single person I know knows someone who's been impacted.
It's like actually unbelievable.
Yeah,
It's actually unbelievable. It's also another trauma. I just feel like that has, been really heartbreaking to see as well for our community.
right. But you jumped in and mobilized with one of our other advisors, Jenna Paris, to help right away. It was like within hours. Do you want to talk a little bit about Moms for Relief?
Yes, of course. So obviously, I grew up in LA and born and raised. My heart is here. My family is here. And when the fires happened, a lot of friends and family were affected. And it was devastating and heartbreaking. And immediately, I decided I needed to jump into action however I could. And by the way, we all did. The city of Los Angeles was so incredible instantly of how we can help. People were showing up left and right. Again, it's this example of community. It was beautiful. But I got a text message. I saw a post on a girlfriend's page asking brands for their help in sending product. And I texted my friend who I've known for how I'm like, how old am I? I've known her for 25 years 30 years actually, probably close to that, in between that. I texted her, I said, "How can I help?" And we started brainstorming, and a couple other girls came into the chat, and then a couple other girls came into the chat, all moms born and raised in Los Angeles, all with deep roots here and people and loved ones that were affected by the fires. And we started an organization called Moms for Relief. And we are a grassroots organization that is jumping into action to support and care for people who have been affected by the fires. And we were able to so far, and it's been 2 months since a little over 1 month, I'm sorry, since the fires happened. We've gotten 200 plus brands into the hands and arms of almost 2,000 people, men, women, teens, babies, and have been able to support them with essentials and resources that we can provide through our connections and community. And it's been beautiful and it's been heart-wrenching and it's the least we can do, but there is power in finding your voice. And I do think that being a part of If You Heard What I Heard really was the impetus in my personal journey to understanding that my voice and my conviction my voice has power. What I'm passionate about and what I feel a conviction towards, I can be impactful even if it's in the smallest way. That's gratifying to me. And I'm now applying that to Moms for Relief and I'm really 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 proud of the work that we've done.
I mean, by the way, like within I think what 48 hours or the 72 hours, like I walked in to this space that you guys had and I was completely blown away. I was like, "Oh my god, just the level of organization and amount of product that you knew was going to make such a big difference to these families." It was like I remember came in to get some stuff for two families that I've been helping rebuild and you just were like, "Here, take this, take this, take that." I mean, like it wasn't I just couldn't believe how quickly it all came together and just the scale of which amazing.
Let me tell you something. The power of moms. We know how to get organized and
Yeah.
we know how to achieve a task, any task. And we have an amazing group of people and volunteers who have showed up and rolled up their sleeves and gotten involved. And it's been wonderful. Like I said, I think that in my personal journey of being an advocate for things that I believe in, If You Heard What I Heard was the start of that journey for me.
But I'm so curious to know though, like, did any part of you leaping into action, do you think any of that was driven by your Holocaust survivor DNA of like, we gotta do? Yeah.
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying. It's like that's what I was kind of implying, and you articulated even better. I think that I want to make a difference, and we all need to play our part in the future for our children, and speaking up and rolling up your sleeves, and I think the capability. I My grandparents always taught me that I was a capable person, and they always taught me that I was strong. And you know what's so interesting? I haven't thought about this in a very long time. They would always say, like, "You're strong. It's in your DNA." And I really actually, until right now, have not thought about that. Every single one of them. Look where you came from. Even my parents would always say, "Look where you came from. You're strong. Look where you came from." And that is empowering. That shows that if you really have a vision and put your mind to something, you can achieve it. I mean, look at all four of my grandparents. That's exactly what they did. It was survival.
I mean, just like the lessons that have come out of this tragedy of the Holocaust that we take with us for today. Like I say it all the time, but we are the lucky beneficiaries of their resilience. And this is why. This is why. Yeah. Unbelievable. Amazing. Well, thank you for being here with us today.
I feel very honored, and I love you, and I feel so honored to be a part of the organization that you've worked tirelessly to build. And I will continue to use my voice and be an advocate on all of our behalfs. And I do feel very hopeful for our future, and I do feel strong in our message, and really look towards a brighter future for our kids.
Amen. And it's 100% mutual. I'm so grateful for you and Micah and everything that you guys do for our organization every day.
I think we need to do another dinner.
Let's do it.
It was one of the best, most memorable nights of the summer. And I look forward to posting it again.
Yeah, we're going to do it again. Already happening. We're doing it. But in the meantime, for those listening who live in New York, join us on March 18th at City Winery for a night of Jewish joy, a night of resilience with Matisyahu.
Not to be missed. Not to be missed.
Thank you for listening to If You Heard What I Heard. If you'd like to learn more about our work and support our mission to make sure the world never forgets, please visit our website, ifyouheardwhatiheard.com. We will never let these stories be lost. It is the job of our generation to make sure future generations never forget so that it never happens again.